Good after, Good afternoon. This is Elliot Fineman, CEO of National Gun Victims Action Council, and welcome again to our special radio show. It's The Guns Stupid, a very specific name to describe a very specific uh, philosophy behind our show. We don't talk politely here. We're going to talk about the issues exactly head on the way they should be talked about. And each week we're going to have a guest from our side, which stands for gun safety, uh, and the pro gunners, who stand for the things that the pro gunners believe. Today we're going to start with Heidi Yewman in a few minutes, who is a longtime gun safety activist, and then meet with a very interesting guy who's written a book, Knowing Guns, the Ins and Outs of Firearms and Firearm Politics for the Uninitiated, Stu Chisholm. Uh, what I'm going to do in the first part of our show, as we always do, is discuss a news item. I normally do it with Martha Rosenberg, our senior editor, but Martha is away on a well-deserved holiday right now. And I'm going to discuss one item that came across my desk during the week that involved uh, the Sport Foundation, the Sport and Gun Foundation, uh, having a big fly-in this week in Washington to get all the politicians together with all their lobbyists to assure that the politicians not only do the right thing, but also reward them with contributions for doing the right thing. This is an unbelievably intense program that is one they do every year. And it's one that, in a way, explains why we have the insane gun laws we have. And people always ask me, well, what are insane gun laws? And there are so many, it's hard to keep track of them, but just a few that come to mind immediately. Imagine if we had smart guns that could only fire if the owner's fingerprint was identified on the trigger. Uh, well, of course, we have them. We have that technology. We've had it since the early 90s. It's now perfected. You can do it with radio frequency controls. It's precisely perfect. It's being used on cars now to start them. We're soon going to be living in a keyless society because of this. And yet, we can't get smart gun laws, smart triggers, or smart guns passed. And the reason is stunning to me, because each year there's roughly 800 children under 19 that commit suicide with guns, and virtually all of those guns are their parents' guns or relatives' guns, ones that aren't stored properly. But even if they were stored carelessly and there were smart gun triggers, uh, they couldn't use them. If the killer at Sandy Hook, who stole his mother's guns, if those guns had had smart triggers, those 26 people and the 20 children and the 6 adults would be alive today. He couldn't have fired those guns. So this was one of the really perplexing things to me, as to why can't we get something as clearly and basic and sane passed as smart triggers? And I did a lot of research, and it took a while to find out, but the answer came from a lawsuit that had been filed by the NAACP in 1996 against the gun industry. I think it was 1999, against the gun industry. And in that lawsuit, there was an expert witness who the judge at the end of the trial commended for the diligence and accuracy and depth of her report. And what she discovered was that each year, 25%, one out of every $4 that the gun industry sold went to criminals, went to the criminal market. Criminals are funny. When they use a gun for a crime, they get rid of it, so they buy a new one. Uh, So that's 25% of the market that would be affected if you had smart triggers, because with smart triggers, you'd cut deeply into the criminal market. Uh, we can't get smart gun laws passed, and one of the major reasons is this weekend that's happening with the sporting goods people, the Sports Foundation inviting all the lobbyists and politicians for a quote, friendly get together. Well, we have an answer for that. It's our Tell and Compel program, because we're done asking for the politicians to do the right thing. And I'll be talking about that later on after we visit with our two guests. So right now, I'd like to introduce Heidi Yewman. Heidi is a dear friend. She's also one of the most professional people I know that's been working in the movement to find us and get and obtain sane gun laws. And Heidi has been doing this ever since the shooting at Columbine. And Heidi, hello. I hope the weather's reasonably good out there. And
Yeah, hi, Elliot. Thanks so much for having me on your show.
oh, well, thanks for being here. I'd like if you could just quickly maybe share with the audience why it is have been an activist for what is it now, 15 years? I mean, it's a lifetime right now.
Yeah, it's about 13, 14 years. Yeah, so basically what happened was I graduated from Columbine High School 13 years before that shooting. And Dave Sanders, the teacher that died, was my basketball coach and my typing teacher. And I remember sitting at his funeral, looking at my former teachers all crying and upset and seeing them in this vulnerable, sad state that I'd never seen them in. And decided right there that this was ridiculous. This shouldn't happen in America. And I wanted to get involved and do what I could to stop this kind of thing from happening, these school shootings. So that was when I jumped in, and then a year later I was at the Million Mile March, where 750,000 of us went to demand that there's some gun laws be passed. And so I've been working on this ever since.
Well, you've worked on it in many capacities. I know you're on the Brady board. I also know you're the head of the Million Moms March group of Brady's, and you're very active in, I think, working on a program I'd like to talk with you about, which is the Ask program. And you've written a book, an incredibly compelling book, that when I think it was one of the first things you did, that when I read it, brought tears to my eyes. You interviewed many people who had lost loved ones to gun violence. You had a professional photographer photograph them, and you recorded their words. And anybody who wants to really understand what a victim feels like should, in fact, read the book. Heidi, what's the exact title of the book?
So the book is called Beyond the Bullet, Personal Stories of Gun Violence Aftermath. And the book came out in 2009, and it tells the story of those people who've lost loved ones to gun violence, or they've been shot and survived, telling their story of what happened and really what the impact is. So many times we're talking about statistics and throwing statistics around here and there, and this kind of goes beyond that and really looks at the emotional, spiritual, physical impact that gun violence has on individuals and families and communities.
I wasn't going to talk about this, but since we're kind of down that trail, you recently had a remarkable experience. You were invited to a prison in San Francisco, I think it was, or was it?
Yeah, just south of San Francisco.
And could you share with the audience why you were invited and what happened there? Because it was pretty remarkable when you shared that story with me.
Yeah, one of the felons that is in for life is part of a program called Restorative Justice, and it's a program that a lot of prisons have, where they bring the perpetrators along with the victims not the specific victims, but victims of similar crimes, where they come together and they talk about kind of what each other's perspective is and what happens to each of them, so they have a better understanding. And anyway, this restorative program is for prisoners who are at a point in their incarceration where they can really understand the impact, and they're working to become better people and understand what they've done and the impact that they've had on communities and families. And so one of the prisoners heard about my book and ordered it, and then brought it to the rest of the group. And so there were about 20 of these guys who were in for life, most of them for murder, and they'll never get out. But they're wanting to make themselves better people. So I was invited to go and speak with them and talk about my book, and then they shared what reading my book meant to them. So it was really interesting because some of them read it 3 or 4 times, and the pages were all dog-eared and highlighted, and they, these huge, like these hardened criminals were just crying as they were explaining to me which story or stories meant something to them that really made them understand more fully what they had done and why it was so terrible. It was a really moving experience, not just for them, but for myself. Of course, writing a book like the book I wrote, I really wanted to make a difference. And in that moment, in those couple hours that I was there, I really did feel like I made a difference.
Well, you have made a difference, and I was completely struck by how you really touch these people. I remember you said several of them had said to you, "We never understood. We just understood what we had done or how it affected
and
families."
It's interesting, Elliot, too, because these guys are the throwaways of society, right? We put them in prison, they've done something terrible, and we throw them away and lock them up for life. And but they're, the human aspect of them really was apparent, and it was just human to human. And we all suffer from when these things happen, all sides of the crime or the tragedy.
Well, we're all connected one way or another, and many of us suffer. And sadly to say, there are many of us who don't. And
sure too.
We'll talk about that at some other time. But sadly to say, many of the most vociferous pro-gunners are people who have not displayed to anything I've recognized, anything like empathy or anything like really caring what their pro-gun positions have wrought. I'm not saying every gun owner is that way, but there's sure enough, probably a quarter of the NRA members, according to polls. But that said, that's a topic for another visit. My understanding is that each day, 7 to 8 children are murdered. These are young children, under 19, children and teens. They die every day. And 50 of them are shot but survive. And I don't know how many of those are from accidental shootings, but I do know that those statistics were part of the ASK program. And I'd like you to share with us the whole theory and reality of the ASK program and what it's done and how it works, etc. So might I ask you to do that?
Yeah, so let me go ahead with that. Thanks for asking about that. The Asking Safe Kid campaign is an educational campaign that came out of Brady campaign, and it was developed before that by the now current president, Dan Gross, of the Brady campaign. And it's a simple campaign in that it encourages parents to ask if there's a gun or a loaded gun in a home before allowing their kids to play there. So you're right, 8 kids are killed every single day in accidental and suicide shootings. And so the premise of this is there are 40% of homes with children have guns in them. So let's look at that from a practical standpoint. So if you live in a neighborhood and there's 10 homes with kids in them, 4 of those have guns in them. So that, and I don't know about you, but I can't tell like what a gun owner looks like and what a gun owner doesn't look like at all. So they don't all have NRA stickers on their foreheads or anything like that. So without knowing that, when you let your kid go to another kid's house, there's a 40% chance that there's a gun in that home. And there's no way to tell if that gun's locked up or if it's stored correctly or if it's just sitting on the coffee table. And so,
Heidi, would you hold that thought for a moment, that
Sure.
we don't know when we send our child over where and what the situation is with the gun, if there's a gun. We have to take a break, and we're going to be back in 2 minutes. And I really want to continue into this because it's, to me, one of the most important things that our side has done. So we'll be back in 2 minutes. Don't go anywhere.
There are many sounds in your day-to-day life. There are sounds that wake you up. Sounds that make you smile. Sounds that energize you. And sounds that help you relax. But there are some sounds that can alert you to danger and can help save lives. Wireless emergency alerts, now on many mobile devices, use a unique sound and vibration to bring you information about severe weather events, Amber Alerts, or other emergencies in your area. With critical information from local sources you know and trust, you can be in the know, wherever you are. For more information, visit ready.gov/alerts. Brought to you by FEMA and the Ad Council.
Packers,
Vikings,
Red State,
Blue State.
We come from different places.
Uptown,
Downtown.
We come to different conclusions.
half empty,
Half full.
But no matter how different we are, we're all connected, and we can all make a difference. That's why United Way brings people, expertise, and resources together to improve the education, income, and health of our communities, the building blocks for a better life. When we live united, our efforts, magnified by others, add up to real change. Children succeed in school, families gain financial stability, the health of our neighbors improves, and suddenly, so do our communities. But real change won't happen without you.
Live united.
So let's look beyond our differences.
Live united.
One by one, let's make a difference. Let's reach out a hand to one and influence the condition of all.
Live united.
Give, advocate, volunteer. Live United. Sign up today at liveunited.org. Brought to you by United Way and the Ad Council.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Visit us online at weactradio.com.
Welcome back. You're listening to It's the Guns Stupid radio show hosted by Elliot Fineman, CEO of National Gun Victims Action Council. And we're talking with Heidi Yewman, one of the leading figures in the fight for gun safety and sane gun laws. Heidi has been talking about the ASK program. And Heidi, we just took a break when you were saying that there's a 40% chance that when you send your child to someone's house, there'll be a gun there, and that your concern is how the gun is stored, if it's in fact stored, if it's loaded, where is it, etc. And so that Brady had developed the ASK program, and you were kind of going into the details of that. So if you could please continue, that'd be great.
Yeah, so like I was saying, if you live in a neighborhood where there's 10 homes with children in them, 40% of those have guns in them. many stored unlocked and loaded. So what happens in a very practical standpoint is several years ago I was with my two kids who were 2 and 5 at the time. Went up to visit a friend, and she was working, and so she told me where the key was and said, well, make yourself at home, and I'll meet you there. And so the kids and I, for about an hour, hung out. I made sure that my little one couldn't get into the Clorox underneath the sink and that kind of stuff. And then that evening, we had dinner with her husband and decided to watch a TV show. And I said, well, I don't really want to have the kids watch what we're watching. So my friend said, well, let's have them go upstairs and they can watch a movie in our bedroom. And I said, oh, fantastic. And her husband turned to her and said, we need to move the guns. And I said, what guns? And he said very nonchalantly, oh, we have 2 loaded handguns in our nightstands upstairs in our bedroom. And I realized that my kids had been in and out of that room for a couple, for an hour earlier that afternoon. So, a nightstand is right where the kids could pull that out of the drawer. And that really made me think, I never thought about this question. So I thought I was being this great mom because I'm really concerned about their safety and I'm making sure that they're safe. But here they are. There's 2 loaded handguns right within reach. And so I heard about the Asking Saves Kids campaign, and I thought, man, this is really perfect because it's not a question that people think to ask. And so when I started asking it, it was kind of difficult because you really feel, Elliot, like you're asking somebody, how much money do you make? It's like this personal question. And I found that it's really not, because it's a safety question. So I ask other kinds of questions all the time when my kids would go to people's houses. I'd ask them, what's the rating of the videos? If they went somewhere in the car, do you have seatbelts for all of them? Those kinds of things. So it's just a simple question that I would ask on top of the other questions. And I've yet to have anybody be offended by this question, because I'm asking from a safety standpoint, because really that's what it's about. And the interesting thing about this campaign is, even if you go on the NRA website, they have a thing on there about the Eddie Eagle program, which states, don't have guns where children are. The difference between this program and the Eddie Eagle program is the Eddie Eagle program, it really makes sure that kids aren't around guns, but they're responsible for their own safety. So it's all about, if you see a gun, then you need to go to another room and tell an adult. This program I love because it's the parents that are in charge of making sure the kids are never in that situation where they have to make a decision on their own safety.
Well, they're also not qualified to make that decision. And I've seen videos produced by the Pediatric Association where they show that kids who have been young kids, say 4 and younger, 5 and younger, have been told to exactly, if they find a gun, come into the next room, report it. And they're put into tests where they're shot, where they're observed and video is taken of them. And every kid that found a gun started playing with it. Not one kid turned it in.
Well, yeah, absolutely. You're right. Kids are not qualified to make that decision. And certainly, I can't keep my kids out of the cookie jar, right? And I'll tell people, look, my son is very curious, and he gets into things he's not supposed to, so I need to make sure that there's no loaded guns in your house that he can get into, and then I'll bring it up that way. And the other easy way to ask is, oftentimes I'll use humor, and I'll say, my son's not allergic to peanuts, but he's allergic to bullets. So there can't be a gun in the house where he's playing.
Now let me ask you a question. I'm sure in your asking, and I know you have, that you've had people give you an answer you didn't like. saying, yes, we keep the guns upstairs, they're in a closet, or, they're not locked, they are loaded, whatever. Have you then said, well, you're not sending your child over? What did you do?
Well, here's the one thing I learned early on. You do not show up with Billy on the doorstep with the big present for the birthday party and ask the question on the doorstep, right? Because there's too much pressure. And so if they say, yeah, we've got guns and they're all over the house, and yeah, they're loaded, like, you're in that situation. You're not going to say, sorry, Billy, we got to go back home, because the kid's going to freak out. So you don't put yourself in a situation where it's a difficult decision to make. So I tell people, make sure you call beforehand and establish that relationship, and put it with other questions. I have had people who, when I've called them beforehand, have said stuff. There's like a hesitation, and then they'll say, well, we have squirt guns, and it's sort of weird. And so when I get that feeling inside my gut, like, this is weird, or they hesitate before they say, well, yeah, I think so, because sometimes moms don't even know what their deal is with their guns. So when I feel that, then I'll ask and say, well, hey, you know what? Actually, it would work better if he came to our house. And so I'll invite them to come to our house. Because the thing in my head that always is there is, if I don't ask this question because I'm embarrassed, or I don't ask this question because I'm scared of the response, like, what's it going to feel like when I get that call that my son's been shot or my daughter's been killed? It's like totally, and that motivates me every time.
Well, I completely respect it. It makes sense to me. It doesn't make sense to me that any parent can have a gun and leave it not secured. And we have tried to get children access prevention laws passed. But, of course, we haven't for the moment been able to do that. But we will. We will get them passed.
Yeah, and
Heidi,
I don't know why the NRA doesn't endorse this. I mean, nobody wants kids dying from guns, and no one wants kids playing with guns. Both sides. It's universal. And so, I would love to see the NRA, endorse this. I think it's a great idea. It's conversational. I mean, who knows? Maybe you can find your hunting buddies through these conversations.
Of course, they should endorse it, but they don't endorse it because they feel any single law that's passed means guns will be confiscated ultimately. Mm-hmm. And so something as sensible as this, that every parent, gun owner or non-gun owner, would agree on, we can't get the protection in yet. But we have a program that's going to get that protection in, and I'm going to talk about it later. Heidi, we've got to have you back. I wanted to talk about Facebook. We just don't have time. But I'm going to see if your schedule will allow, you to come back for a next visit and talk about that. In the meantime, thank you so much for joining us on It's the Gun Stupid. And
thank you, Elliot.
I look forward to seeing you in person sooner than later.
All right. Sounds great. Thanks, Elliot.
Take care. Okay, we're going to take a break now, and we'll be back after the break for an extended session with Stu Chisholm. Stu, I hope I'm saying your name, pronouncing it properly. And we're going to talk about two specific things. One is guns being used for self-defense. And if time allows, we're going to talk about gun-free zones. So let's take a break, and we'll be back in a couple of minutes.
Today might be the day I drop out of school. Today could be the last day I try. My parents alone can't stop me. My friends can't even stop me. But you might be able to. With United Way, you could tutor me, be my mentor, or volunteer to just read with me. If someone had helped me earlier, I might not be struggling. And studies prove that kids who read well by 3rd grade are more likely to graduate. There are tons of ways people like you can help kids like me stay in school. And United Way is calling for you to be one of them. Because it takes 12 years to create a graduate. It takes about the same time to create a dropout. And the difference between me becoming one or the other could be you. Make me a success, not a statistic.
Take the pledge to volunteer now at unitedway.org. Brought to you by United Way and the Ad Council.
Let me tell you who to blame. Blame the boy lying at your feet, his body oozing life through the hole in his stomach where the bullet tore him apart. Blame him for challenging you, for not looking away and for not backing down when you pulled out the gun. Blame your mother for bringing you into this world when she was but a kid herself, and for dragging you up, not bringing you up. Blame society for not giving you hope. Blame your father for not being there, the man who looked after himself instead of looking after you. Blame the gun in your hand for making you a target, for making you more likely to be picked on. Blame the dead boy, blame your mother, blame society, blame your father, blame the gun, blame anyone but yourself for not being strong enough to put down the gun, to break the cycle.
Okay, we're back from our break, and Stu, hope you're there. I think you hope you can hear me, and looking forward to talking with you in depth about those two issues. Just for our audience, Stu is a very accomplished guy. He's a DJ. He's been involved in as a leading DJ in his field, and got very concerned about guns providing protection and security from, as I read your background, Stu, two major incidents. Something that happened to your mother when you were young, where she used a gun to ward off a threatening situation. And also as a DJ wanting to be secure and safe. So I imagine you've had some situations there that were of concern. What I would like to do is you've been very active in helping reform the conceal and carry laws in Michigan. You belong to the grassroots group, Michigan Coalition of Responsible Gun Owners. And what I'd like to talk to you is about conceal and carry, but conceal and carry always rests on the notion of self-defense. So I'd like you, if you'd like to talk a bit about conceal and carry or self-defense and lay out your position. I've got some questions I'd like to ask, but why don't you kind of tell us what your thoughts about this?
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it, the invitation. And the reason I wrote my book, Knowing Guns, was to kind of give a nonpartisan, non-like NRA-type answer to a lot of the questions that people have on the topic. Because, like, I was listening to the last segment, and they were talking about, you were talking about some of the issues, like with the law and like smart guns, and people go, why don't we adopt this stuff? Well, in my book, I try to address as much of that as I can, because if you're going to write and enact laws on guns and what have you, I think it's only proper to consult the experts, those who know guns, gun laws, gun rights, and how they're all supposed to work together. That includes law enforcement. It also includes having people from, like, the NRA at the table, and of course the folks from the Brady campaign as well, because their concerns are every bit as valid. And I try to remind my pro-gun friends about that too. And as far as concealed carry goes, yes, I'm a mobile DJ. I'm often prowling the streets late at night in a very high-profile vehicle. It's well-marked because it's a commercial kind of a thing. People understand that, DJs sometimes carry money. We obviously carry thousands of dollars worth of equipment, were very ripe targets, and so I decided to check into concealed carry for my business. And when I did, I discovered that there were a lot of loopholes and a lot of barriers in the way. And it seemed rather odd for what I considered a constitutionally, enshrined right to have so many barriers, especially when my record is clean. Some of those barriers are financial ones as well. They seem to be a little over the top, in my opinion. So I worked with a local grassroots group, the Michigan Coalition for Responsible Gun Ownership. And by the way, they are firm believers in gun safety too, just sometimes differing in how to go about getting it. And we work to reform our concealed carry laws. The results kind of speak for themselves. As some writers put it, it was a massive yawn. It neither was a giant boon to crime prevention, but nor did it hurt. And a lot of the experts are saying that the difference probably is because just as gang crime and drug crime has risen in other major cities, like it has here in Detroit, any mollifying factor that concealed carry has had, plus the publicity for open carry now, may have just balanced the equation. So, when the number of criminals and criminal activities increases, but the number of concealed carry goes up, and criminals are aware of this stuff, that it may have just balanced the two. So there you go in a nutshell.
Yeah, it's an interesting proposition. You hit on a couple of things that I would like to respond to. Mm-hmm. And one was you talked about the fact that you have a clean record, and it cost a few bucks, to when you looked into the conceal and carry, you felt it was an undue infringement, if you will, for you with the clean record to have to go through a background check, or you didn't use the word background check, but to have to go through some hoops to get your gun.
I did. Yes, I submitted to the
and there was a cost.
Check.
Here's my problem with it. There are three pillars that all of our nonsensible, what I call insane gun laws rest on, but forgetting the adjective for the moment. And those three pillars are confiscation. We can't pass any gun law because if we do, that's the first step towards taking our guns away. And
not necessarily. I think the main objection there is registration.
Well, and my argument, just as an aside that I talked about on the last show, is that the government doesn't have to know where a single gun is, to take them all away. And the penalty that we non-gun owners pay because of not having registration is that people with real mental issues have guns, and we can't take them away. People who didn't have mental issues when they got their guns and subsequently did have breakdowns and did have mental issues, we don't know they have their guns until they go out and use them in some horrible thing. But putting confiscation to the side, other than to say that the government does not need to know where a single gun is or who has a single gun to take them all away.
No, it would just make it extremely easy.
Yeah, they just would pass a law, and that would be that. Anyone with a gun would go off to jail in 60 days, would go off to jail for 15 years. They'd be fined a few $1 million. Anybody who knew someone with a gun. I mean, it's just a matter of passing the law. So the idea of we can't have registration.
You can't force, say, criminals to comply with the law. It's illegal now for felons to have firearms, yet felons have them. The law, you can use them punitively. So if you discover someone has a gun who shouldn't, then you can punish them on the basis of that law. But the law can't prevent a criminal from doing criminal things. That's why they're
Absolutely
criminals.
not.
They break
But
the
that
law.
argument is like saying we shouldn't have traffic laws because the people who are going to speed and go through red lights and go through stop signs are going to do it anyway.
Oh no,
Whereas
have the
the
law. Have the law
law-abiding
by all
drivers
means.
won't.
But what I'm saying is that the laws impact the law abiding. So, if you make a law saying murder is illegal, well, okay, the law abiding are going to abide by it, but the criminals will not. And so when you enact a new law, you have to consider its effect on both sides. There's a goal you want to achieve. Okay, so say you want to achieve less shootings. Okay, so that is a goal, and I think that's a goal shared by everybody. So you propose a law saying, well, let's mandate smart guns. Well, there's problems with that, and first of all, the bad guys aren't going to trade in their regular guns for smart guns. They're just not. You're going to create a tremendous black market in the wake of that edict. Okay, just like we did for drugs, and we made Al Capone rich because of prohibition. The same logic applies. So you're going to make law-abiding citizens now trade in their guns, and at a tremendous cost, by the way. These things aren't cheap. And not only that, the technology is not perfected. I've researched this a lot, and no police department have yet adopted the technology due to their unreliability, just to questions of the reliability, long-term reliability. I mean, would you want your life, if it depended on your having a weapon at hand at a bad moment, dependent on whether or not your battery was fully charged?
Well, I will get to that in a moment. The idea of self-defense, of you're having a gun at the right time to defend yourself, because the reality is that the element of surprise always defeats the gun carrier. If carrying a gun offered self-defense, no policeman would ever lose their lives. But unfortunately and tragically, they do. The element of surprise always trumps the gun carrier. But let me get back to an incredible distinction, and I'd like you to help me with this. Tell me. I could phrase this in one of two ways. We've had LaPierre talk about the only thing that stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun.
Yes, like in Fort
Hood. We've had you, in fact, just saying now, making a distinguishing factor between law-abidings and criminals.
Yes.
And I'd like to know what a good guy is. Define a good guy for me. Define a law-abiding person for me.
Well,
what's a law-abiding person?
I will do that in a Dr. Phil kind of way. The best predictor of the future is the past, and that includes behavior. And you'll probably notice that whenever they find a shooter or a criminal, and you're watching the news, and they're either one of two things. They're usually, most times, either highly mentally disturbed, have some big problem, and a lot of people knew about it, such as Jared Loeffner, who shot Gabby Giffords and should have been prohibited from buying anything. He should have been in an institution, in my opinion. But anyway, so they're either mentally disturbed or they have a long criminal history. You hear about their long criminal history. And as a matter of fact, it's the recidivism and the revolving door policy of our prison system that puts a lot of these people back out on the street when they really shouldn't be. So I guess that's the definition. I passed a FBI background check, meaning they found nothing more than parking tickets in my history, and people
that's
in
the
Michigan.
Danger of living in the city.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I'll admit I've broken some speed laws too, but
we all have, Stu. We all have.
In Michigan, we all have to pass an FBI background check, and this isn't the instant check that you run just checking your ID to buy a gun. This is a more extensive thing. It used to take months and months, but since so many states have adopted concealed carry, they've gotten computerized, and it's a much faster process now. But still, it's more extensive. It's the equivalent of getting a level 1 security clearance for, say, a civil service job. So people with permits, at least in Michigan, I can only speak, I don't know too much about other states.
Michigan is different, isn't it?
Well, each state
some
is
of the
different.
southern states,
I'd
you
like
don't
to
need
see
a permit
some
at all.
reform. Yes, I'd like to see some more uniformity between the states. But that's a future battle. So people with permits have an exemplary record. Each year, the Michigan State Police put out a report on concealed carry and permit and how it's permit holders and how it's working. And statistically, we are involved in less crime and especially gun crimes than even the police. So
well,
I guess that's what I'd call a good guy.
This overwhelmingly show that more guns equal more crime, not as John Lott would argue that more guns equal less crime.
Well, I've never seen
and we're
that.
We're gonna have John Lott on the show down the line
verified.
here. But here's what I was getting at.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that there is a world filled with law-abiding citizens, with two types of people, law-abiding citizens or criminals, and that it's a two-person world or a two-personality world, to me is misleading. It's false. It can't be true, because if one just thinks about it for a moment, every criminal was once a law-abiding citizen. The reality is that law-abiding citizens are law-abiding till they're not.
We're all born law-abiding.
Yeah, well, and some of us remain that way, and some of us don't. But here's just from a proposition point of view, and the proposition is this: if you'll accept, which I think you do, that law-abiding people can change, they can become non-law-abiding. Then,
to an extent, yes, we've all blundered into breaking a law here or there, and I would make the proposition that most law-abiding people, and I would say that there are really two kinds of people. I address this in my book. There's actually scientific studies that show that the actual brain architecture of criminals is different. There are distinct actual physical differences in the wiring of the criminal brain. Now, that doesn't mean that 100% of the people with this distinction turn criminal. But it does show that 100% of career criminals have this distinction. So it's a very real thing. I would say. I'm no behaviorist. I'm just a guy who plays records for a living, but. According to all the research I've read, the vast majority of people are generally law-abiding. They're respectful of each other, and it's because usually we're very empathetic. We're very empathetic. We also have respect for the law and our system. But there is a distinct element.
This is an ideal person. Studies have shown emphatically, now that they can map the brain and actually see the cells turning on and off, and have identified which ones are involved with aggression, kindness, empathy.
Mm-hmm.
People who simply don't have empathy.
Exactly.
But, and here's the point. This is I just want to advance a proposition for you to think about, because I don't think we can, go through it all in one show, but that doesn't mean we can't have you back and talk about it, again.
Sure.
The proposition is pretty simple. In most countries that I'm familiar with, England, France, Italy, Germany, Scandinavia, etc., getting a gun for self-defense is not a reason for allowing you to get a gun. They have strict gun laws, and you cannot say, I have a situation that requires me to have a gun for self-defense. They just won't give it to you, because they know that guns fail to protect anyone due to the element of surprise. But that said, if we give 1,000 people conceal and carry guns, the right to walk around with guns, some percentage of them are going to snap. Some percentage of them are going to move from law-abiding. 1,000 law-abiding, wonderful people, 1,000, you give them 1,000 of them get guns, some percentage are going to snap. So the proposition is, would your side accept more difficult out conceal and carry guns and more monitoring, or does our side have to say we're going to be forced to take a bet that none of these people will change their mind, will snap? And I don't think that I don't want to have to take that bet. But I do have one condition where I would take the bet. Here's the one condition where I would take the bet that anyone can walk around with a gun who, at the moment when they purchased it, was in fact a law-abiding citizen. And the bet would be that if you, the people who support their rights, would agree to be co-conspiracy, take co-liability for anything they did. If these people went out and killed or massacred, you'd be, murderers. If they went out and committed assaults, you would. So if you want to take that bet, I'm willing to take the bet you want me to take. But I'm not willing to take the bet that people should walk around with guns because they've been law-abiding. It's, to me, a lousy bet. But I'd like you to just think about it.
Well, I would ask the same of you, though. I mean, would you vouch for anyone's behavior over the long term, especially people you don't know only by their record?
I would like to live in a society where nobody walks around with a gun. And my reason for it is precisely this. People snap. Yes, criminals will walk around with guns, but I've written a piece, you may or may not have seen it, that I would, if we lived in a society where only the criminals had guns, where only the criminals, they were the only ones with guns, we would have a far safer society. And I base that on the fact that we know what happens in a society where only the criminals have guns, and that's in England. In England, no one can have a gun except a rifle that shoots 2 bullets at a time for hunting.
Well, let me
just finish this point. But the criminals can have any gun they want. They have all the guns they want. There's black market. They have every gun they want. And in England, they have 45 gun homicides a year. We're 5 times their population, 300 million to 60 million. So all things being equal, we should have 5 times 45 or 225 gun homicides a year. We have 10,000. So I'd feel safer in a society where only the criminals had guns. That's me.
That's an interesting take. I don't know that I would take that bet here in the U.S. simply because not only do we have a higher population in general, but of course we have far more problems with gangs. We have a far more vigorous
don't
crime
know that
problem
that's
here.
true.
I'm sorry? I'm losing you.
Sorry, Stu, I don't know that that's true. They have gangs the same as we do. They have illegal drugs like we do. They have immigration. They have poverty. They have, it's a mirror image. They have everything we have except they don't have guns. So it's a safer place.
I got to be pragmatic about it because there are, I address this in my book, by the way, there are several different factors in play that make comparisons kind of problematic. For one thing, we have Mexico as at our border and drug cartels operating now within U.S. borders. They're very porous, and they have very strict gun control laws in Mexico, and they're not working. Their cartels pilfer fully automatic weapons from their military, for crying out loud. So there's a lot of different things between the U.S. and England. England is basically an island, and it's much easier to control the flow of illegal weapons in and out of the country. It makes a lot of things possible. But let me let me get pragmatic and talk about. You talked about the odds of being actually in a violent confrontation. And when I was researching my book, I noticed that according to the FBI statistics and the U.S. Fire Administration, you're about three times more likely to be involved in a violent confrontation than you are to be killed in a residential house fire. I also have a, people say, well, it's very prudent and very smart of you to have smoke detectors and do fire drills and have a fire escape ladder from your second-story thing, because we all know this is something that can happen. Yet, if you have a shotgun for defense against, say, home invaders, or if you carry a concealed weapon because, you're in a bad neighborhood, or you carry a amount of cash, or you're in a high-profile business like I am, or for any reason, really, then you're called paranoid, and you're a danger. Yet I've owned guns since I was like 12 or 13, and I've carried one since about 1997, and no one's died. No one has a hole they didn't start out with as a result. And I've never shot myself in the foot. And I don't think I'm atypical. I know a lot of people in my local community who are CCW holders or just general gun enthusiasts, and I got a lot of my information from them. This is how I learned. You were talking about your last guest was talking about securing guns in a home with children, and I had a friend who was an adamant Second Amendment supporter, and he just became a new father. And so he was showing me the guns in his safe in his basement, and I said, so what do you keep for home defense? And he goes, oh, I don't. I don't have a gun for home defense. I keep everything here in the safe. And I said, well, why? And he goes, I've considered the odds. I've lived here for 35 years, and there has been no times when someone's kicked in my door in the middle of the night. He goes, I compare that with the 100% probability that my son is going to get into every little nook and cranny in the house, especially when I'm not there. So he goes, there's no real moderation between safety and preparedness for an unlikely invasion or attack. And I agree with that. He's a very smart man, and this is a guy who's an NRA member and a Second Amendment supporter. And I would say that this is the logic that runs community-wide. It's not atypical.
Well, I would say this, that we, have been well established that a gun in the home is 22 times more likely to be used to shoot someone in the home than to ward off a defender. Again, I would come back to practicality. And
no, that's been
here's the deal: if you're lying in bed in your bedroom and someone bursts in with a gun, no matter how many guns you have in your bedroom, you're not going to move. You're finished. Hoping that they're all going to just take
there's
your
a lot
TV
of assumptions
and
in
cell
that
phone.
scenario.
There's nothing
You're
you
making
can
a
do.
lot of assumptions. First of all, you're assuming that someone can immediately burst into the room you're in without any forewarning. A lot of people are awake.
I was trying to make a point
breaking
that
glass
if you heard the person coming, okay,
Yeah.
if you would, let's say you had a 2-story house, and you heard the person, that you heard noise down.
Yep.
Plenty of time to open your little safe, whatever you had your gun stored in. You'd have plenty of time to open it, load it if it was unloaded, and sneak up on the person who was in your home. You'd be the one with the element of surprise. To me, it's real clear. Whoever has the element of surprise wins. It's as simple as that. So if the requirement for safety is that you're going to get your gun, someone's burst in, and you're going to have enough time to get your gun and resist them, I don't think that's real. But
I'll tell you, the newspapers are replete with incidents exactly like that. There's a part of my Facebook wall that I keep. I get a lot of email and a lot of stories come through, And I usually vet them first, they got to be from a legitimate news source. But every day I get stories of someone who has successfully defended themselves, their family, or their home from an invader or a criminal attack. And I put it in a running thread on my Facebook wall called "For the It Never Happens Crowd." And literally, there are thousands of times every year that are documented, that actually make the papers of people successfully defending themselves with a firearm. This recent Fort Hood incident, by the way, was brought to a halt by an armed officer, a female officer, and this brings up another thing. You were saying that the element of surprise is a main element, but there's another element, and that is one of training. Now, your average criminal is not trained. They have no training. If you have been responsible, you've gotten your permit, you've at least had a modicum of training, and there is a basic tenet that instructors teach people with concealed carry permits, and that is the triple A's. It's awareness, avoidance, and then action. Awareness is simply paying attention to what's going on around you, because when trouble's coming, most of the time you can see it coming. Now, you're right, you can't beat the drop. If someone's got the drop on you, you can't beat that. But you, most of the time, can see trouble coming. Great story. A woman was shopping in the mall, had a great time. By the time she started to exit the mall, it was getting dusk, and it was kind of gloomy outside. But she had parked under a street light, and when she, exited the mall, she could see her car under the street light. But she also noticed that there was a drizzle going on, and that the parking lot was almost clear, and there was a gaggle of kids standing around her car. Now, she didn't think much of a gaggle of kids at a mall, kind of a common thing, but she did find it odd that they'd be standing outside in drizzle. And then she noticed these kids were a little bit older, and they were looking around, and she thought, I can wait to get in my car. I think I'll just call mall security and go back to the food court and have a latte for a minute. And, of course, 15 minutes later, mall security had swept the lot, and she had gotten in her car without incident. Now, that could have been nothing, but it looked like trouble. And so you you just make sure that your awareness is such that you could see something like that.
Well,
and then when you do see it, she did the second one, avoidance. She avoided the situation altogether.
Another going with that, it would be the person who said, yep, I saw the kids around my car, they looked suspicious, I took out my gun, they ran away.
Yeah, that's illegal.
Here's my problem with all these anecdotal stories. And by the way, I'm really enjoying our conversation, Stu. We're a little bit over here, but I think the producers are enjoying it too. So
me too.
Means we got to do it again. But my problem with these anecdotal stories is that they typically end with the person who had the gun not reporting or turning the would-be danger, in.
Right.
So
right.
It's hard for me, I hear many of these stories, and I don't deny that there are certain situations where the very act of having the gun kept an argument that says, there are certain situations where the very seatbelt was what allowed the jaws of death, or whatever they call them, to get you out of the car. You've been wearing your seatbelt, they couldn't. But that's not an argument for not having seatbelts. Anyway, I think we're kind of over where we have to be. What I'd like to do is to continue this discussion with you. I'd also like to make you aware of the fact that we've challenged the Illinois State Rifle Association, the NRA. We've made a $50,000 bet with them that they refuse to accept. They're kind of chicken to accept, I guess. But we're going to do it anyway. To prove our position is that carrying a gun in public doesn't provide self-defense. Their position, of course, is just the opposite. And my position is, let's find out.
Well,
let's
I'd like
agree
to ask,
on a
what
way
is
of
the
finding out.
standard?
Let's find out. And my proposal is to get either an where they train their officers in kind of real world conditions, and we'll have people conceal and carrying. I'd like to find, and maybe you'd be one of the experienced ones. I'd like to find people to take, to go through the test. Those that had no training, those that had a day or two of training, which is considered a big deal. Oh my God, we'll have conceal and carriers have a day or two of training 5 years ago, and that they're cool. They're not cool at all. They're going to be blown away.
Well,
but
as a budding instructor, I'm a big fan of training.
Let's find out. And my bet, my bet, meaning our organization's bet, is we're willing to put up $50,000 either to help pay for the test or to just make it a straight bet with the Illinois NRA. Maybe the Michigan group wants to make the bet, but we're pretty sure we're going to win that bet. I'm pretty sure you guys think you'll win the bet, but gee, let's find out. Because I think carrying guns.
I'll tell you. I mean, I was going to ask what your standard is for that bet, because there are many documented cases where permit holders have saved themselves or someone else, and so I mean, it depends. I guess
the documented cases, almost 99% of them all end the same way. So I took out my gun, and the criminal ran away, and that was that.
Well, that's a large percentage. And by the way, I always instruct, or I plan on it. I should say I always tutor those that I talk to about guns. That even if they have such an incident, that they call the police and report it.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
The reason being that if you're in the
And
right,
better still,
that guy won't
get
report
the
it, and
get
if
the
you're in the wrong,
perpetrator
you're gonna
off
be
the streets.
call.
Well, Stu, listen, a pleasure talking with you. I understand with your mobile, DJ truck, you probably do get into some nasty places. It presents
So
a special
so
consideration. It does.
Yeah.
And one of the things I've learned is that there's not 100% of anything, so while I'd be for no one walking around with guns, I'd still, be open to something like your situation. Look, let's visit again, and maybe you'll help us put this test. The idea is to do the test where everyone agrees what the standards are. And then when we all agree, let's do it and find out.
Yeah, I'm on board.
Make life a lot easier for everyone. Okay, well, take care. A pleasure talking with you, and we'll do it again. And
same here.
Okay, I think I'm going to have to sign off now. But again, we'll follow. We'll continue this discussion. Okay, well, it's the Gun Stupid. Show informative. There were a number of things. We never get to cover everything that we'd like to cover, but we sure have covered quite a few things today. And tune in 2 weeks, because we'll continue our tradition of talking about a news item and then interviewing, visiting with somebody on the gun safety side and visiting with someone on the pro-gun rights side. And look forward to seeing you on our next show. Take care.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Visit us online at weactradio.com.